what happens between blacks is personal. But what happens between a cop and a black is a business thing.
Okay.
So think of it like this. As a cop, if you were a cop, when you put on your uniform, have your badge, you're taking an oath. Each and every single day you do so to protect and serve. So if you come to me, that's the first thing I'm expecting. That's what I want. To protect and serve, whether it be protect and serve the people. Even if I'm doing bad, if I'm doing harm for the community, I want you to protect and serve them.
Yes.
Right? Also protect and serve me if something goes on with me, you know?
Yeah.
But the issue is that what a police officer does to that black person, for example, that's not business. It's personal, because I'll tell you why it's personal. Because
You mean personal between black and black crime being personal, or
no,
officer to
officer to black, because let me tell you this. If this cop is racist, right? In his heart, he does not like black people.
Okay. You're talking about me
As an officer.
As an
officer.
Yeah.
As a police officer, you're more concerned about me as a person, not me as a black, with defined as a race. I'm a person first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Before I'm a race. So for you to have that hate in your heart, to find a way to, let's say, kill me, or try to make it, pretty, like a pretty crime, whatever.
Okay.
Just
to
not
shift the blame from you.
shift the blame, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem, because it was in your heart. You weren't a police officer at that moment. You were a person. You made it personal. It's not supposed to be personal. It's supposed to be business. The issue is, I don't mind if a cop, or I don't mind if a person is racist and he's a cop. I mind if he's a racist cop.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. If he's
I mind if he's a racist cop,
if he's exerting in his role as a cop, and what happens in his mind
Right,
doesn't matter,
because
but if it affects what he's doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what happens with black people?
Because also too, like, that's something that we can actually trace empirically. We can trace these things empirically. Like, well, that's what kind of troubles me about, like, the IET, like, implicit bias test, and trying to, like, chase these kind of implicit ghost ideas. That's really hard to trace, right? We're kind of like trying to fight a ghost.
Right.
That's why,
And
a big reason, it's probably a big reason why, these aren't really used legitimately. IETs aren't really used legitimately, like, in court proceedings, because it's like it would be better to kind of trace, like, what we can control rather than what we can't, subconsciously.
So to bring both of what you guys are saying together here, there is no evidence that those who actually test to have implicit bias. So you take a test, it says you have implicit bias. There is no evidence to say that there's any direct correlation to that becoming external.
Well, the court is not going to use those implicit bias
But
tests.
here's the issue, and this is what you're talking about with, is it a racist person that happens to be a cop, or is it a racist cop?
Right.
And here's also the issue with implicit bias, is that while implicit bias, to whatever extent it may exist and to whatever degree it exists in each person particularly, while that is bad and we can agree that that's bad, every human being, and we've all experienced this, every human being has certain impulses at different times that are bad. So that's part of the human condition, is that we're going to have impulses from time to time that are bad. The difference between a good person and a bad person is that a good person doesn't act out those negative impulses. So even if you have implicit bias, that doesn't mean you're actually choosing to act out those negative impulses.
And to kind of echo off of what you're saying about the impulses, this is why there's more harm within the black community, because it's personal. When it's personal, it's going to be more emotional, if that kind of makes sense. Now if it's a business thing, like, you have to kind of put your emotions to the side, serve that person, and then you keep going. Like, for example, if I have a problem with you outside of work, let's say I work at Burger King, I'll see you come through the drive-thru. I don't want to spin your burger, because of what you did. My job as a Burger King worker is to serve you.
You got to set your personal biases aside
to
do your job.
to do my job.
And at the end of the day, one of the best incentives for that is capitalism. At the end of the day, because capitalism generally cares about one color, right? And so the color green, and incentivizing people to, hey, it's forced altruism, right? If I treat this person with respect and kindness and so that they deem my product worthy of purchasing and giving me a product or service in return. That's almost like one of the best ways to actually eliminate, to kind of eliminate some of those issues, is the forced altruism of capitalism. But I kind of want to go back to answering, because kind of giving voice to your concern, Peter, that you're talking about. Because if it's actually happening, then we legitimately need to be addressing it. Like, if it's legitimately happening that blacks are being killed at absolutely disproportionate rates than whites at this massive systemic level, like that's being claimed by groups like Black Lives Matter. Where's that actually happening systemically, right? So, because when we're talking about a force of 800,000 officers, approximately here in the U.S. here today, 50 to 60 million interactions with police citizens, and we're talking about, according to the Washington Post in 2019, was 250 black people shot and killed by the police, and 5 of those black people were not armed and were not fleeing. Like your dog analogy, for example, if your dog comes over and accidentally bites me once, right, or nips me when we're playing or something, if I was to take that one incident and say, your dog has a problem with over aggressiveness, rabies, and we need to put it down, which is basically what Black Lives Matter is claiming, is wanting. They want the police department actually to be defunded, gone completely.
Abolished.
That's a really, really, it almost feels like an overreach, right? And so I'm not trying to say that everyone that supports Black Lives Matter supports that principle, but that's plainly stated by the organization itself, and that seems to be a bit too far, especially when we look at okay, where is this happening systemically? It seems like to not be as. It doesn't seem to be happening systemically on a data level. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if I can kind of address kind of what you're saying. When you said Black Lives Matter started basically with the killing of Trayvon Martin, I think the biggest issue that happened there.
As an organization.
As an organization, as Black Lives Matter, as an organization, was what happened was. I'm pretty sure he either pled innocent or he got acquitted.
You talking about George Zimmerman?
Yes. The justice for the community was not there. If that makes sense. If going off of the evidence, whatever has gone down. I mean, people could say this, people could say that. But the issue was that a man died. Okay.
Yes.
But a man didn't necessarily pay for his crime.
Okay.
And then,
and there's definitely controversy as to whether or not he was guilty of going and killing Trayvon Martin, because he was acquitted ultimately, and so by a jury, and go ahead.
And so just kind of talking back and forth with you guys, I don't know if this would make sense, but kind of hear where I'm coming from. I think if anything, it's the media.
Well,
the media is where. The systemic issue is happening. The numbers will speak for itself. Numbers will speak for itself. But it's what's being publicized is what's the issue.
And that's where most of our attention is turning.
That's where most of our attention, because we are more prone to look at the news than to look at the statistics. We want the news to tell us the statistics.
Coming to those people's defense too, it's when you see the images of Derek Chauvin with his knee on the neck of George Floyd, it's hard to have any other reaction than, oh my gosh, that's so nasty, that's disgusting. And those images really stick in your mind, and who wants to who wants to go and wade through pages of statistics and stuff when I have these experiences and I see something in the media and I see these people around me that are frustrated as well.
Yeah. It's very emotionally
provocative. Also, I feel good when I start saying hey, there's systemic injustice. Maybe I can't point to it, but I can feel it, and I see these experiences, and there's a guy on TV, and it makes me feel good, and I can post on social media, and I can look down and be condescending with anyone who disagrees with me because they're racist.
That's the issue.
It kind of snowballs into this righteous and virtuous witch hunt, as it feels like, with anybody who would like to disagree and say like, well, the data says this. I don't know if we should be defunding the police entirely. I don't know if we need to castigate all people that work in this particular line of work and that work very hard to actually protect us when there are vulnerable communities.
Very vulnerable,
because it's really doesn't cost that much for celebrities, for example, to go out and to say like, hey, I'm going to support this movement. I think the police are horrible and they should be defunded, or to basically, to throw shade at the police when these people live in gated communities and they live in places with, homeowners associations and they live, with personal security and people that are around them protecting them. The people that are hurting that I'm afraid of and this is where I kind of struggle, like if all it really did was like raise awareness about these particular issues, about what people are experiencing. I mean, I'm all for having more and more perspectives.
Right.
But what I'm afraid of is we might not, in our look to fighting this supposedly systemic problem that I'm having a hard time even
defining.
I'm having a hard time seeing how it's being defined and also finding the data where it is defined, having a hard time to find the data to back it up.
Right.
I'm also trying to look back and say, hey, like, on the flip side of the coin, like, who is actually being hurt by pulling the police out, for example? And what I'm afraid of is that the people that are taking the fall for that are minority communities. Right. And actually, so I don't just say this because it's an idea I've had. This is actually a concept from a guy named Roland Fryer, who's a black economist from Harvard, and he was looking at some of the data for particular events that of police interactions that happened in five cities, particularly Chicago, Illinois with Laquan McDonald, Ferguson, Missouri with Michael Brown, Riverside, California, Taisha Miller, Cincinnati, Ohio with Timothy Thomas, and Freddie Gray in Baltimore. Probably the ones that got the most media attention, at least for me, that I can think of, is Laquan McDonald, Michael Brown, and Freddie Gray.
For sure,
But what he looked at is because these police departments had investigations come in, like federally, to look in and see, okay, is this a systemic problem in their police departments? And basically what they found is what Roland Fryer termed the Ferguson effect, which is obviously named after what happened in Ferguson, Missouri with Michael Brown, and his death and his killing. Basically what happened, what he describes as the Ferguson effect, is that the police, after these investigations come in, the police take a step back from the communities in the sense of they stop policing as aggressively and they stop inserting themselves as much into the community to try to prevent crime. And what he found, basically, when factoring for different variables and things, that there was an increase in crime in these particular 5 cities that he was looking at. And it to the effect of 900 extra homicides and 34,000 extra felonies that were more than would be normal.
Right.
Because of the viral media coverage and the
target that the police might have and the reception that they might get from the media.
The media reaction to kind of basically putting them in a skillet. Right? Putting them in the oven. You're turning up the heat on them. And when the federal investigations come in, what are the police, what are they supposed to do other than like, okay, we're like, all of our moves are being questioned and everything. They take a step back. Right. And those communities are the ones that
getting hurt.
Because there's less policing happening there. And that's what I'm actually concerned about with Black Lives Matter is like, how do we raise the awareness of this issue, but also at the same time empower the police and tell people, hey, be respectful to the police. Try to follow what they've asked you to do. Because it seems also to be a general. I've had run-ins with the police. You've had run-ins with the police.
Course,
Daniel, you've had run-ins with the police. But the motif that we're kind of finding is, if you're respectful to officers, they generally treat you with respect in return. And if you just listen and follow the directions and treat them with respect and make their job easier, they've treated me well as a minority American. Again, that's anecdotal. That's anecdotal personal experience, but I think it's indicative of the problem that Black Lives Matter is kind of creating in its wake that it doesn't recognize, and it's not really realizing that how are we empowering the police to be able to protect the communities, but also raise awareness that, okay, there are there are some bad people
So, yeah.
that need to be, and more awareness needs to be addressed, or
So
it needs to be brought
we're
up.
throwing the baby out with the bathwater, basically.
Yeah.
And the people that are taking the brunt are minority communities.